Well, let's get started. We're going to do the classic Christmas story. I think it's already, this particular Matthew and Luke one has been redone and done already this year too many times. So you're probably going to hear a rehash of things that you've heard before. I'm going to try to find some new things to talk about. But we'll get started. It starts in Matthew 1:18. And it says, "Indeed, the birth of the Jesus Christ thus came about, when as his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found in womb having a child from out of the Holy Wind. Indeed, Joseph, the husband of her, being righteous and not willing to expose her publicly, proposed secretly to send her away." Very generous of him. A couple of things over here. First of all, a Hebrew wedding started out with a betrothal, which is where the marriage contract was made. All the parties, it started a kind of an engagement period, but not like the engagements that we have today. During the period of betrothal, you were actually considered to be married but not married. It was married but not consummated, I guess is a good way of putting it. Mm-hmm. From the time that the wedding contract or the betrothal occurred to the time the actual wedding where the groom receives his bride is a year. 1 year.
And they're actually married. I mean,
well, they're married, but they haven't
so
consummated the marriage. Mm-hmm. You know, so she's still a virgin. He's supposed to be a virgin. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so at the 1 year point, then he goes and gets her and takes her to his father's house, or to his father's house, and that's the deal. But she was found being pregnant during the period of betrothal, which is an adultery situation. But as we learned earlier, adultery requires two participants in order for adultery to be charged. Yeah, she's pregnant, and yeah, she probably had sex out of wedlock, but in order for them to do something about it, both her and the man that she had sex with, that she got pregnant by, have to be brought to the temple in the accusation phase of that whole deal. Well, it's to make it kind of tough because she tells Joseph that the Father is the Holy Spirit. You know, good luck on getting him stoned. Mm-hmm. You know, so he's kind of in a quandary right over here. People are beginning to realize that she's pregnant and that it's not him. And so his idea there is a divorce. He's going to send her away secretly. So it's going to be a private divorce. And that's what the phrase "send her away" means, is that he's divorcing her. So he's not going to do this publicly because it would be embarrassment to him. It wasn't that he was such a nice guy. It was that, how do you tell this story, right? Right. Yeah. People are just going to laugh at him. Yeah, right, she had a baby by the Holy Spirit. That's the way it happens every time, right? Yeah. So he's thinking, he's proposing some things. But in verse 20 it says, "Indeed, these things being pondered, behold, an angel of the Master appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, you should not fear to receive Mary, the woman of yours, for that in her, having been conceived in her, is from out of the Holy Wind." A couple of things happen in this verse. One of them is Matthew, or the writer of Matthew, is describing the angel as an angel of the Master, which means that it's an angel belonging to Jesus. You're an angel that's serving Jesus, yet Jesus is in the womb. So we see that kind of on a continuous basis, we see a lot of protection, supernatural protection occurring around Mary. And this is just one example of that type of thing. But it's interesting that instead of angel of God, or angel of Theos, which does happen in Matthew, they specifically use this phrase, the angel of the Master. And that word for master is only applied to Jesus in the New Testament. Okay. And the angel tells her, "Do not fear to receive Mary." So the second half of a marriage is that year later, is where Joseph receives Mary. He takes her as his wife to live with him. and they consummate the marriage. So the first part is the betrothal where she's given to him, and then the second part is where he goes and receives her, goes back and gets her again.
Before the baby is born.
Well, hopefully, but in this particular case, I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think the angel tells him, Joseph, to receive Mary well before that period of time.
Okay.
And then it says, indeed she will bear a son, and you will call the name of him Jesus, for he will save the people from the sins of theirs. The interesting takeaway there is he says to call him Joshua. If this was written in Aramaic, which it originally was, then instead of him being Jesus in Hebrew, it would have been Joshua. That's actually the Hebrew name. Jesus is a Latinized version of a Greekized version of a Hebrew word. It's not actually his name. It's kind of a created name. Mm-hmm. You know, if you translate something enough times into enough different languages, sooner or later it bears no resemblance to where you started from. Mm-hmm. And rather than transliterate it, which is what they should have done and called it Joshua, they decided to Latinize it instead. And how we know this is because the definition, which is the third line here, is for he will save the people of his from the sins of theirs. Yahushua, Shua is saved. Yahu is a diminutive for God. There's a couple of diminutives for Yahuwah. Yahu is one, Yah is one, and Yah comes in two forms, kind of a prolonged A and a short A. So Joshua, Yahushua, is God, or Yahuwah saves. Or effectively, he who gives breath saves that which he gave breath to, in manner of speaking. Because that's what Yahuwah means, is he who gives breath. Mm-hmm. Okay. And of course we have the function of theirs that he will save the people of his. Very important, not all people. He will save the people of his from the sins of theirs. But by virtue of the fact that Jesus considers all people to be his, we kind of covers everybody. But the fact of the matter is the only people that he is going to end up saving are the ones that become his.
That's right.
And in order to become his, we have to become his possession again, and acquiesce to becoming his possession again. Once again, we're back to this master-slave relationship. Ah, 22, indeed, all this has come to pass that may be fulfilled, that having been spoken by the master through the prophet, saying. Okay, now we see this again, where we have Isaiah, effectively, Isaiah 7:14, and the writer here is saying that Isaiah was inspired by the master. Once again, he's inspired by Jesus. So you see where in the Old Testament you have times when Jesus operates as an independent deity. And this is an example of one of those, Isaiah 7:14. It says, behold, the virgin in womb will hold, which means that she's got a baby in her, and will bear a son, and they will call out Emmanuel, the name of him. They won't call him Emmanuel, they will call out Emmanuel, the name of him. Okay, and the word name here in Greek means something different than what we use the word name for in English. Typically today, the word name in English is a name. That's like, you know, you're Fred, I'm Alan, she's Janice. Mm-hmm. Okay, a name in the Old Testament was more along the lines of your character or who you were. Like in the day, you were not just merely Fred, you were the carpenter Fred. Right? Just like I'm the engineer Alan.
Okay.
So it goes to who I am more in my character and my skills than it does to a name that my mom gave me. Right? So they will call out Emmanuel, the character of him, which being translated with us, the theos, or God is with us. But it's a future tense kind of thing. Emmanuel is a future tense. God will be with us kind of a deal, more than anything else. And that comes from Isaiah 7:14, which I said before. Therefore, my master, he will give you a sign. Once again, we see the word master in Isaiah. I mean, so it's not just conjured up in the New Testament. This is something that actually came from the Old Testament and they carried it over. So he's called master in Isaiah as well, or Adonai, which is my master, not just master. Adon is master. Adonai is my master. So anything with an I on the end of it generally means a possessive, which is mine. He will give you a sign. Behold, the pregnant virgin, she will bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. Incidentally, Emmanuel is a future, a word that's a kind of future version of the Hebrew word Hosanna. Emmanuel, if you break it down, is El will be with us, the El Emmanuel. Im is with, Manu is us, and El is the name of God. And then Hosanna is Yahu Shana, obviously Yahu, the diminutive for God. Shana is a phrase that means here and now. Okay, so if you looked at a little kid who is being disobedient and you said, come here now, or here now, that's Shana. So at some time in the future, these people are running down the street waving palm fronds and yelling at Jesus, Yahu Shana, which is, Yahoo is here now. So can you see where this prophecy is fulfilled when she says, when they say, he shall be called, it shall be said of him, Emmanuel, or God is with us? Well, as a future tense looking thing, that's the same as Yahushua, which is Yahweh is here now. Just a different choice of word for God. And then the word for name, Zonama, the manifestation or revelation of someone's character that distinguishes them from all other people. I've been politely or impolitely called a jerk more than one time in my life. So that would be a characterization of who I am. But does that distinguish me from everybody else? Well, there's lots of us around.
I've been called worse than a jerk.
Yeah, so I'm being politic and polite here. Indeed, having awoken from the sleep, the Joseph did as the angel of the master had commanded him, and received the woman of his, and he knew her not until she had brought forth a son, and called the name of him Jesus. Okay, so he does what, Joseph understands that this is God, and he does exactly what God says. He's very obedient. And it's important to note that that's the hallmark of Joseph, is his obedience to God.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Later on, I suppose we'll get here. We'll just continue on. In chapter 2 of Matthew, indeed, the Jesus, having been born in Bethlehem of the Judea in the days of Herod the king. Okay, Bethlehem is about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. It's almost in a straight line south of Jerusalem. Okay. Behold, Magi from the east, rising up, came near toward Jerusalem. Well, this occurred in the crossover of the Hebrew year that crossed 3 and 2 BC. Okay, so the first thing that happens is Jesus was born 3 BC, September 11th, between about 6:15 and 7:45 in the evening, which would have made it the first day, or basically September 12th is what it would have made it if this was Hebrew reckoning. September 5 o'clock would have made the next day in the afternoon. And the proof of that is in Revelations 12:1 through 5. There's an astrological account that describes Jesus' birth. And it describes it in enough detail where I can pick out this specific of a time. So within about a half an hour, or an hour and a half, I should say, we have him nailed down to. And considering that most labors take a little bit longer than that to happen, you're probably going at it well. Okay, it also turns out that this particular date is Rosh Hashanah, which is the Hebrew New Year. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple of stars here real quick. Regulus is the king star, which occurs in the constellation of Leo. It's one of the paws of the constellation of Leo, which is associated with Judah. So there's 12 constellations, and each of those 12 constellations are associated with the tribe of Judah, or with the tribe of Israel. And there's 4 major ones and 8 minor ones. And the way they work is on the poles are the major ones. It's like east, north, south, or south and west are the major ones. And the only one I'm going to deal with right now is Judah. Judah's on the east, pointing east. It's Leo, constellation of Leo. And if you lay this thing down flat in the temple, main door of the temple is pointing east across the gates to the Mount of Olives. So there's this wedge, a 1/12 of 360 degrees, which is about 30 degrees, I suspect, wedge that comes from the center of the Holy of Holies pointing out towards the east. And everything in that path is considered the tribe of Judah.
Oh, okay.
And every one of the other, and then there's of course a minor tribe on either side, and it's usually broken down by who had which kids. But so you'll have 3 associated in the cluster, 3 more associated in the north, 3 more in the west, and 3 more in the south. Okay, and there's a huge amount of Bible writing concerning this Hebrew astrological cycle. In fact, nearly all the dates in the Old Testament are written that way, and about half of the ones in the New Testament are written using that astrological cycle. So when they talk about Jesus who comes to the temple from out of the tribe of Judah, or the Messiah coming from out of the tribe of Judah, they're not saying that he comes from the middle and leaves. They're saying that he comes from the outreaches and comes to the middle. So in other words, if I'm going to be coming to church from out of my house, I am leaving my house to come to church. So if Jesus the Messiah is coming to the Jews to Jerusalem from out of the tribe of Judah, he's going from out there to the temple.
Yep. Okay,
and that's exactly how he comes. He comes riding a donkey from out of the Mount of Olives, from out of the tribe of Judah, from that wedge concerning the tribe of Judah, across the bridge into the temple. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be a blood relation to Joseph. It just means that that's how he comes to the tribe of Judah, or comes to Israel from out of the tribe of Judah. And so they make a lot of effort to try to associate Jesus / Joseph with the tribe of Judah, which in Jesus' case, I'm sorry, but he's not your dad. And all that you have left is your mom, and she's from out of the tribe of Levi. Okay, so that's where the priestly line thing comes from him. So you have Joseph who provides the king side of it, and then you have his mother who provides the religious priestly side of it. Okay, so you got this star Regulus that's in this constellation of Leo, 1 of 12 things. The one preceding it is Virgo, which is a virgin, female. And that's also plays pretty big because that constellation Virgo plus the sun and the moon is how they arrive at the birth date of Jesus. If you plot all of those symbols in the sky exactly as they describe them, it is a condition that only occurs at one point in time ever. And it doesn't occur, it could occur at other points of time if we lived a couple 100,000 years. But that ain't happening, so effectively we can say it happens at one point in time. So these stars and whatnot. And these magi, that's what they studied. Daniel was a magi. Daniel was head of the magi. Okay, and so magi were highly educated people who studied all of the knowledge available at the time in astrology, astronomy. which their version of astrology was more like our version of astronomy than it is like our version of astrology. You know, they weren't using it so much to predict the future as they were to marking time. Because if I have a handle on math, a little bit of math, I can predict all of the cycles of all the planets and of all the stars, the sun, the moon, everything. And I can create a mathematical model that we can play forward and play back. And nearly every single planetarium in the world has that program. And it's great fun at Christmas time to back the stars up to the birth of Jesus and show how all these, the planet Jupiter was operating, Mars, Venus, and all the different planets and constellations were operating in order to get this one point in time. So this is not so much esoteric as it is flat mathematics. You know, the Earth revolves around the sun every so many days. The sun revolves around whatever every so many days. You know, everything has got a very fixed time associated with it. And so if you have two cycles and you compare them where they intersect, if they only intersect once, you know, which is be lucky, you can say, okay, when this intersects that, that's when this will happen. And that's effectively the formula that the prophets took. When this and this happen, then this will happen. Or it's when they intersect. So what they're talking about is some kind of planetary body making being found in a certain position in the sky in conjunction with some other planetary body. And you can pretty much nail down time pretty closely with two planetary bodies. Okay. And so that's what's happening here. There was a series of conjunctions, and a conjunction kind of is when one planet overtakes another and they get real bright because they're the same. And then there's a retrograde, which is a different kind of conjunction. That's where Jupiter and all the planets that are beyond the Earth look like they go across the sky, then they stop, they back up, and they stop, and then they go forward and continue on. And it actually does this, makes kind of an ellipse in the sky, or a bullseye up there. And so the really big trick is when one of these planets circles something, that's a big deal, because it doesn't happen very often. In this particular case, in 3 BC, there was a conjunction of Jupiter and Regulus, which happened to be retrograde as well. So you have this planet, this star Regulus in the sky, and as the seasons move, slowly the star, like every star, moves across the sky, rises and sets. You know, every day it's a little farther in the sky, a little farther in the sky, a little farther, until finally it's gone. And Jupiter does the same thing, pretty much across the same line, only it's a lot faster. And then it does this back and forth kind of thing. Okay, so Regulus is moving across the sky. Jupiter overtakes it, swings around it, and continues on. And this point of swinging around it is important because every single planetary body and star body, you can tell where you're at on Earth by its angle from the horizon and what time it is. And those charts were worked out in the 17 and 1800s by a bunch of scientists, and they're still in use today.
Cool.
Okay, now the ideal one that really tells you a lot is when that star is just directly on top of you, 90 degrees, like this. If it's right on top of you, that's considered a really special condition of location, highly accurate. Okay, and so what you're going to see here is these wise men chasing Jupiter. They already know something's going to happen. They've done their math calculations. They know there's going to be all kinds of extraordinary things, which means that these stars in their mind are telling them that the location. So it's not just the time anymore. They got the time dialed in because they can do the calculations. Now they want to find out what's underneath them. And so every day, Jupiter rises in a certain part of the year, and it takes a long time for it to set. They're following it every day. They take a star shot. Oh, Jupiter's a little farther. Nothing's happening, a little farther, a little farther, a little farther. And then they start noticing that it starts approaching Regulus. Ooh, this is interesting. What's it going to do there? And then all of a sudden this thing stops at Regulus, does a circle. They take the star chart, the angle, and if it is directly south of them, they're on a straight line to where it's either going to be north or south. So if the position of that star when it does it is the same from horizon to horizon, that means that whatever you're looking at to make it 90 degrees is either north of you or south of you, depending on where location. And in this particular case, it was south of them. And so they walked from east to west until the star stopped. And it stopped for about 6 days. Jupiter does. When it retrogrades, it takes about 6 days. And while they were there, they weren't at 90 degrees. They were at some other lower number. And this is kind of fun. I guess I don't have it there. Where did I hide this at? Oh, here we go. The Bible says that the Magi saw the star come to a stop while they were in Jerusalem and on December 25th, 2 BC. The ordinary time for the Magi's pre-dawn observations. Jupiter would have been seen in the meridian position at an elevation of 86 degrees above the horizon. And meridian position means half and half. Okay? At 68 degrees up, by calculation, from the equator. Okay, because that's the base of all astronomical observations, is the equator. But the Earth tilts 22 degrees, and this is solstice, winter solstice, so this is the extreme tilting in that direction, so you got to add 22 degrees to whatever the calculated elevation is in 90 degrees, and that's why it looks straight up in the sky, even though its position is considered 68 degrees. If it had been any other date than that...
Are they talking about the star that was brighter than all the other stars?
Yeah, well, it really wasn't the star as much as it was a conjunction.
See, I had heard from the astronomers said now, so they think that star went supernova, and that's why it was so bright.
Well, no, it's actually a conjunction, and it does get extraordinarily bright, by the way, when you have a conjunction, or I mean a retrograde of Jupiter around any star. Mm-hmm. It's like almost like moon bright.
Mm-hmm. But they had thought that star at that point had gone supernova, but it had happened like 200 and some thousand years ago. Yeah. Man. But by the time the light got to Earth, that was the brightness that it had emitted at that point.
But in this particular case, it was just common ordinary astronomy. It was nothing spectacular. And the worst part of it is it's repeatable astronomy, which means that we can plug it into a planetarium and, you know, the position of the stars, start timing time back, let it cycle its way back, and boom, all the stars in the sky are exactly like you saw them, and boom, you have this one that just location that goes ultra bright on you.
Yep.
And it also, the unique thing is it's perfectly meridian over Bethlehem, so it gives them the location, perfect location. So they're at Jerusalem, and they still got to do a little bit of marching south in order to get this thing to line up at 90, and that's what they do. That's now in the meantime they have a discussion with Herod, but the point is that they knew where they were going, and they were following this star in order to show them specifically exactly where it's at. And that shot could have been made with the equipment that was available to them at the time, accurate to within a mile on Earth. And considering there's nothing in Bethlehem,
yep,
you know, odds are of finding something that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So actually their compass was the stars more or less.
Yeah, they used the stars almost exclusively for all their timekeeping and for their location position. So they come from east to west. Okay, in verse 2 it starts out, I'm going to just go do this anyway over here. Jesus was born in 3 BC 11. Okay. The account with the Magi occurs on this account that we're looking at right now occurs on December 25th of 2 BCE. And this particular account of the Magi is where we get the 25th of December birthday for Jesus. It's wrong, but we still use it.
Run that over one more time.
Okay, this occurrence with the Magi and Mary and the gifts, this is how we get December 25th.
From September 11th.
From September 11th, how we get a winter Christmas or a winter birth date for Jesus is because of this account right over here. But if we read the account more carefully, we find out that it's not his birthday. It actually, at this point, Jesus is already 1 year and 3 months old. Okay? Jesus will be soon going to Egypt, where he stays for 3 years and 6 months. Therefore, Jesus returns to the Holy Land in 2 AD, about the time of Passover, which was April 14th. So they leave, they come back. Herod dies between January 10th, 1 BCE, and 30 days prior to Passover, that Passover in April, March. So there's about a 3-month window there that we're not sure when Herod exactly died. But we know he died before the Passover, and we know he died after January 10th of that 1 year. Jesus does not come back to the Holy Land until after Herod is dead. However, Jesus doesn't return until July of 2 AD. Made a mistake there. 2 AD, making Jesus about 5 years old in 3 months. And after that, we don't hear anything about Jesus until he's 12 years old, sitting in the temple, effectively doing his rabbinical tests so that he can get into a school to learn. That business about Jesus sitting in the temple for 4 days, where his parents don't know, he's being questioned by the priests, high priests and whatnot. Mm-hmm. In order for a student or a candidate to become, at the age of about 12 years old, to become a rabbinical student, or student of the, be a rabbi, he has to be interviewed by other rabbis, usually in a group, to determine what they know and what they don't know and what kind of garbage they have to weed out of them. So that's what Jesus is doing. I mean, the next time we see him after this is when he's candidating to be a rabbi. Now, unfortunately, his parents didn't know he was candidating to be a rabbi. Okay, having laid the argument to rest, he's talking about the Magi here. Apparently, there must have been an argument with Herod's people over this whole deal. So, having laid the argument to rest, the Magi said, "Where is the one having been born the King of the Jews?" They just come flat out and ask another king where the new king is at. Mm-hmm. "For we saw the star of his in the east, which was Jupiter, and are here to kiss the ground while prostrating before him." In other words, to worship him. Okay. "Indeed, having listened to the gossip," which is what the word means, "Herod the king was emotionally agitated, and so was all Jerusalem, and for really good reason, because the last time that Herod gets agitated like this, he kills his wife."
Oui.
Yeah. "You make me crazy, we'll get rid of this problem," and divorce wasn't part of the options. He also got rid of one of his sons that way too.
Okay.
So he didn't really want to make Herod emotionally agitated at any level, because people tended to die around him when that happened. "And having gathered together every one of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he questioned them as to where the Christ was to be born." So Herod is actually Edomian, which means that he is from southeast of the Dead Sea. Well, that's where Edomia is from. And Edomians are all, they're relatives of the Jews. They are from the tribe of Esau, or from Esau. You said Jacob? Well, Esau had kids too. Those were the Edomians. Okay. They also have some connection with Lot as well. Okay. In spite of the fact that Herod is king of Judea, which includes, he's also the king of Idumea and a couple other provinces, Roman provinces. He's kind of, they call him a tetrarch because he's the head of 4 provinces. And he's kind of a king as opposed to a governor. So he hangs out in Jerusalem because he likes to consider himself to be Jewish, a Jewish proselyte.
And he's not.
No, he's not. He's Edomian.
Yeah.
But he wants to be a Jew. And he wants to be a Jew so hard that he builds a temple and a few other things. You know, he's really trying to pander to the Jews, and they hate him. You know, he builds an amazing temple, and they hate him for it. But they like their temple. They just hate him. Indeed, the one said to him, in Bethlehem of the Judea, for this has been written through the prophet in Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small amongst the clans of Judah, from out of you will come one who will be the ruler over Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. Okay? So somebody who's been around since the very beginning. And the only one that comes to mind of that flavor is Jesus. That was the one claim that Jesus made, is that he was with the Father from the beginning. Okay. And then they paraphrase it again, Micah 5:2. It says, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, by no means are you the least of the rulers of Judah. For from out of you one will go forth leading, who will shepherd the people of mine, Israel. Okay, then Herod, having called the Magi, inquired exactly of them the time of the appearing star, because what the Magi told Herod is that this first star that occurs heralded the birth of Jesus. And so Herod wants to know how far back that star, how many days back that star appeared. And they tell him. And having sent them to Bethlehem, he said, when you go search carefully for the child. Now the word for child there is toddler, not infant. Because if they used infant, it would have been a different word. Or newborn would have been yet another word. But they use the word for toddler, so he's got to be at least a year old to earn that title. Okay. Indeed, when you find him, report back to him that I also having come might worship him. So he kind of lies to them. And indeed, the Magi, having heard the king, they went away, and behold, the star which they saw in the east rising led them forward until, having arrived, it stood directly above where the child was. So they're in Jerusalem. This star is still not at 90 degrees. It's low on the horizon, according to their calculations. So they need to walk towards it in order to make it rise in the horizon. Okay, so they start walking toward it. They get to Bethlehem. And boom, where they hit the child, found the child, that's where the star was at its peak. Mm-hmm. And indeed, having seen the star, they rejoice with exceedingly great joy. And we read all the rest of this stuff. So, and when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down. You notice that they're no longer sitting in a manger.
Yeah, no more baby, it's a child.
Yeah, but also the where. They're in a house now. Mm-hmm. They're not in a campground. Okay, so the way it worked in Jesus' time over there is most of the towns were all walled for protection, and outside of the wall of the town, close to the main gate, there would be an area that was marked out and staked out with little plots big enough to pitch tents on, which is what all these people did. They packed their tents up, for fairly large tents, and they would get to where they're going for the night, and they would pitch a tent if they were going to be there for any length of time at all. And then there was a central place where all of the hay and forage was placed for the animals. And then there was a corral for the animals. So typically that's the way it laid out. So the word for an inn is actually the word for a campground.
I thought we just saw a thing Dan posted.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that's part.
We're in this, in like it was already within this enclosure, and within that enclosure they had houses, and that's where they brought the animals in at night.
And that's eventually what ends up happening.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen immediately.
Okay.
What happens immediately on Mary and Joseph arriving in Bethlehem is that there's no room for them anyplace.
But
period. And so they end up in this.
See, that's the other thing that Dan was talking about is they were in the town for maybe weeks for this census thing that they were going
Yeah, they
there
barely
for.
got there. Jews have a nasty habit of not doing anything in a timely fashion. They do things because they have to, and they do them grudgingly. In other words, so if Mary and Joseph had to go do a census, they weren't going to arrive 1 second sooner than they absolutely had
Right.
to, because that was the style of their thinking.
So it's wrong with what?
No, he's right, but his timing is off. Okay, so when they first get there, there's no place for them to stay. Okay, they don't even have a place to pitch their tent. So Mary is having a baby, and so she has a baby literally on a pile of hay in this area, campground area. A little bit later, however, we see that they have transitioned into a dwelling, which is here. That whole baby in the manger thing, that was probably like 1 night or 2 nights until things got fixed and arranged and they could get into their family dwelling.
Okay.
Because the other thing that happens too is at a certain point in time during the day, well before sundown, they shut the city gates.
Well,
So the people can't get in or go out.
Okay.
You know, long about sunset, they start to do this. Well, Jesus was born after sunset. So there's probably a really good chance that you know, she's real pregnant and she's been delaying having this kid for the last mile or so until they could get closer to human beings rather than have it beside the road. Okay, so you see this sort of thing start to happen where, you know, yes, they want to get to the family house, but circumstances are not allowing them to get to the quote father's house or their Joseph's family's house. In the most likely circumstances, they got locked out of the city because they arrived late. But the initial birth occurs out literally under the stars.
Right.
Okay.
And then once the city opens up the next morning, I'm betting money that it didn't take very long for them to get into the family house.
Okay.
So he is right, but like I said, it's a slight timing issue.
Right.
And then, you know, the other thing that we run into is a little bit of prejudice. We seem to think that she spent weeks and weeks in this manger affair. You know, that.
Yeah, but yeah, because the
Endlessly.
Wiseman got all the way across, you know.
Well, it took a year and a half, year and 3 months for Jupiter to rise that far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, so it took them
I
a while to
was
get
also
there.
I was wondering when we were going through that story about last week when they were talking about the Wiseman coming, I'm like, they had to walk, you know,
But
what,
more than a point-
year to get there at least.
It wasn't that it took a year to get there. It's they were following a star.
Yeah.
Or they're following Jupiter.
Yeah.
And they have to take a star shot every single night to find out where Jupiter's at. Because they may have overshot what they
And
were
if it
looking
was
for.
cloudy or if it was whatever, or
Okay.
Yeah.
they couldn't
So
see
they
it, you
don't- they
know,
don't
if there's a
travel
if
any
there's a
farther.
sandstorm or something.
Any faster than the star is.
Yeah.
So, you know, they travel a certain distance that they know the star would have traveled, you know, to make it meridian. And so they're following a meridian planet. You know, they just keep following it. If it's not meridian tonight, well, then they start wait around to find out what it's going to do next. And if it starts moving again, well, then they start moving with it. See? And that's why it takes so long. It's not like, you know, from Damascus to Jerusalem is any great shake of distance. I mean, that could have been done in less than 2 weeks.
Okay. And in other words,
But they didn't know the destination.
Well, they had a pretty good idea what the destination was to be. Remember, these magi had Daniel as their father, in a manner of speaking. So all of the Hebrew prophecies, everything that Daniel knew, Daniel brought to the magi. And the magi were unbelievable collectors of prophecy and any kind of esoteric knowledge. It was considered important.
how people are so knowledgeable way back then. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and see, there was another piece of
Sure,
knowledge that
lost
got them
one,
all
but
jacked
then-
up in the first place is that year 3 BC marked the year that the either, depending on which prophecy you're looking at, which changes the starting point, it's either a 430-year prophecy or a 400-year prophecy, terminates on 3 BC. So they know that the Messiah is coming in 3 BC. They just, for some reason, can't put the connection together where and when. Okay. So it's not a big secret. They know this is happening. They're all ready for it. In fact, it was such a crazy buzz in amongst the Jews about, you know, the fact that this is the year. It was like almost like Y2K for the Jews. You know, Y0K, right?
Okay, now, in other words, when the wise men finally got there, the child, was he actually at about a year and,
Year and 3 months.
yeah, a year and 3 months, what I've seen here, yeah.
In order to get this star shot that they saw, makes Jesus a year and 3 months old.
Okay.
From the original star shot that got them motivated to the star shot that they see in Jerusalem is a year and 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh,
that's
so they were actually at his birth then.
Huh?
They weren't there when his actual birth.
No,
No.
absolutely not.
No.
See, and that's the connection that everybody makes errantly, is that the wise men showed up at the birth of Jesus.
Yeah.
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 That's,
You know,
He did, they didn't.
A little baby.
Yeah.
nah,
Well,
it's,
he was
it's just
still
something
baby.
that they
Little
wash
older.
it down to where you can understand it.
Well, it makes the story easier to tell.
Right.
All the facts are there, just no particular order, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, when they were coming into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Hugely important. This was unbelievably important to them. Okay? And had been divinely warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Indeed, when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Master, once again we see this angel that belongs to Jesus, appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to seek the child of the one, child of God, to destroy him. So, what you see here is the same day, night, whatever, that the wise men are there giving their magi, they're giving their presents, is the same night that the angel comes, is the same night that Joseph, Mary, and Jesus hot-footed to Egypt.
Yep.
Talk about obedience. The angel tells Joseph, now leave, you're out of here. Joseph didn't even have to question, how are we going to pay for this? Because they already had their traveling cash. Okay, it turns out from about Jerusalem all the way down to the river, to the Nile River, most of these were tribes who traded in frankincense and myrrh. They traded in frankincense and myrrh. So they didn't use gold, they didn't use money, they didn't use cash. They used frankincense and myrrh as a trading commodity. So for that period of time during the trip from Jerusalem to the Nile River, before you get to Cairo, they had to pay for their trip. And that's what they used, the frankincense and myrrh, to pay for it, because that was the currency in that area.
They weren't using gold at all.
However, the gold, when they get to Egypt, the Egyptians were not so barter-minded. They were pretty much gold-minded. And unfortunately, Mary and Joseph were immigrants. And the Egyptians weren't real keen on immigrants, especially not Jews. Okay, so now they've got to buy their way in. Bingo, they've got the gold to pay off the bureaucrats.
Yeah, that's all.
So the takeaway here is God tells them to do something, but He's already made provision for them.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the hallmark of God calling you to do something. He won't call you to do something and then you got to figure out how to do it, or you don't work out the logistics. The logistics are already taken care of, and then He tells you what to do. He's already prepared your path.
Okay. Now, these men that came there and seen Jesus there, the gifts, were they given to these men by different people to present these gifts, or just these guys?
These guys are pretty wealthy in their own right.
Okay.
The story of Jesus has very little to do about poor and indigent.
Okay.
Most of the players in Jesus' life, including his parents, were wealthy.
Yep.
Relatively wealthy. But the interesting thing is here is Herod is about to see these. Mary and Joseph were not aware of any threats to Jesus.
Right.
Okay, neither was anybody else around there. This was happening in Herod's palace 6 miles away, where he's getting all wound up. Okay. And it must have been a pretty serious thing because, like I said, the angel comes immediately and Mary and Joseph leave that same night.
Yeah.
There was no messing around. It says here in 14, indeed, the one having risen, he took the child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt.
Oh, by night, huh?
Oh yeah, that same night. See, the Magi come at night. The angel comes at night, and that same night, Joseph leaves.
Yeah, but how can you get out if everything, the walls are...
Who knows? You know, let's put it this
angel
way:
opened up the wall
the spies got out of Jericho. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because everything's closed, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's ways of getting around everything. And,
Well,
and you have to remember that there.
You got some angel coming to you telling you, get out, I'm sure you found a way to.
I'm sure the angel can fix that problem.
That door just opened magically or something.
Yeah, besides just they've got plenty of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to buy their way out.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more untrustworthy.
I'll give you a couple gold pieces, you let the door open and don't say anything.
The joke about politicians is they can't be bought, but they can be rented for a while.
Give you enough gold, you just look the other way as I get
That's
out.
right. It's the way of the world, I guess. Okay, and there he remained, there until the death of Herod, so that it might be fulfilled that the one having been spoken by the Master through the prophet, saying, once again, we have this reference to Jesus in the Old Testament, saying, out of Egypt I have called the son of mine. Then Herod, when seeing that he had been outwitted by Magi, was intensely enraged, and having sent forth and put to death all the boys that were in Bethlehem and the vicinity of it from 2 years and under. So that's why he wants to know when this whole thing started, when the Messiah was born. He makes his calculation, it's to be safe 2 years, a year and 3 months is under 2 years, boom, taken care of. Because technically, at a year and 3 months, Jesus would have been 2 years old by Hebrew reckoning of the time.
Yep.
In time inclusive calculations. The minute he was a minute over 1 year old, he was 2 years old. Okay, because you start out in Hebrew reckoning being 1 year old. The minute you're born, you're in your first year. See. Then was fulfilled that having been spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice in Ramah was heard, great weeping and mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, would not be comforted because they are no more. Indeed, the Herod having died, behold, an angel of the Master appears in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. It's wondrous how they keep doing this reference to angels belonging to Jesus. Having risen, take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they having died, those seeking the life of the child. Indeed, he arose, he took the child and his mother, and came to the land of Israel. Indeed, having heard that Archelaus reigns over the Judea in place of the father of his Herod, he was afraid to go there. Indeed, having been divinely warned in a dream, he turned aside into the district of Galilee. Okay, see, Judah was one governorship, one province, Galilee was another. They were not connected. They were not governed by the same governor. Okay, and having come, he dwelt in a city called Nazareth, and Nazareth is in Galilee, so that it should be fulfilled, that having been spoken through the prophets, that a Nazarene he will be called. This is somewhat difficult because a Nazarene is not from Nazareth.
Oh, okay.
Okay? A Nazarite is in Greek. Okay, a Nazarene is something else. Okay, so a Nazarene is not someone from Nazareth. Another Greek word would be used for a person coming from Nazareth. A Nazarene in Hebrew is a branch or a protector savior. Not like Sosa, which is a savior, but more of a protector. Okay. Nazareth is a place of protection midway on the road between Haifa and the Sea of Galilee. So you have the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean. You have, which is Haifa. You have the Mediterranean Sea and Haifa, which is a principal port, and a road that goes through all the way to Galilee and beyond to Damascus. It's a trading route. Well, the halfway point between the Sea of Galilee and Haifa, which is on the Mediterranean Sea, is Nazareth. This valley, or this plain that they're traveling on, is called Armageddon, or Ezrahelion. Is a Greek name for it. Okay, plays out really, really big. But Nazareth is a town that is set inside of a ring of mountains. Not just like a valley like this, but it's like a bowl, because the mountains go all the way around it. Like this, so it's in this bowl. There's one entrance to it. It's on the north side of this trade route that goes down the plains of Armageddon. A highly protected place, easy to defend against, impassable from almost any other point except through the pass that gets you into this town. Okay, so you can see where, and it's the halfway point, which means it's exactly 1 day's journey from either Galilee or Haifa. So it would be an excellent stopping place. The next stopping place would be probably Capernaum, which is on Galilee, and the next stopping place after that is over the Golan Heights in Damascus. Okay. Okay, that's it. That's the whole story.
That's the whole story? The whole kit and caboodle?
No, well, it's most of it anyway. Except for the parts I didn't tell.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's how all of this plays together, and that's why every single small detail
If it's edible, enjoy it. Okay?
of what's being said is important, because it all
If
has
it's something you wear,
some
fits.
relevance. And I say that in the Bible, there's no irrelevant part of the Bible. We just don't understand the words.
Yeah.
Have a good week, everybody. Enjoy yourself.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Are you gonna be gone next week?
Yes, we are flying out on Tuesday morning, very, very early, and we'll be back on Saturday.
But you will be here Sunday?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no service.
Oh, no, that's right.
There's no,
One service.
yeah.
Okay.